Oil prices jump after OPEC Plus cuts production. In a surprise move, Saudi Arabia says the cuts are there to support stability. And a probe into the emergency takeover of Credit Suisse by UBS. Swiss prosecutors will investigate whether any criminal offences have been committed. Hello and a very warm welcome to World Business Report. I'm Victoria Valentine. Oil supplies look set to tighten from next month after Saudi Arabia and other OPEC Plus oil producers announce OPEC cuts of about 1.1 million barrels a day. Saudi Arabia said the move was aimed at stabilising the market. Well, oil prices are currently trading higher, as you can see, about 5%. This is the second time that the cartel has slashed production. They did so in October as well, cutting output by 2 million barrels a day. Jonathan Robertson is the Global Power and Energy Research Director at Frost & Sullivan, and I asked him how much of a collision course this puts Riyadh on with America.
Well, it's very interesting because Russia had cut its production separately in March, so it sort of suggests a bit of coordination between Russia and Saudi Arabia. And clearly they want to put a floor under the price of oil and see it recovering back up to the sort of $80, $90 a barrel level, where it's been, tracking as low as just below 60 for some of the, just below 70 for some of the benchmarks in mid-March.
Okay, but when we sort of cast our minds back to when we had that output cut in October, things were looking different. Now we've got China coming back on, we've got quite a strong demand. So how true is it really for Saudi Arabia to say, oh, we're doing this for market stability? We're in quite a different place.
Well, you're right. Chinese demand is rising this year because of it's moved out of its COVID crisis. And the US driving season is actually going to be upon us. So the market was expecting that oil demand would increase anyway, naturally, and that should have supported prices. But clearly, Saudi Arabia wants to make sure that happens. And so by moving for this production cut, it's really guaranteeing that it'll put a bit more pressure on keeping prices up.
Consumers around the world, but particularly in Europe, have only just started to see their fuel prices come down and inflation start to ease. Is this going to have a big impact on inflation again and the cost of living?
It is going to have an impact. It's not going to lead to a dramatic price rise, so it probably won't sort of increase inflation, because inflation is already very high. But it is going to make it harder to achieve, particularly in the UK, for example. The Chancellor and the ABR were targeting 2.9% by the end of the year. It's going to make that harder to achieve for sure.
Now, Swiss federal prosecutors have opened an inquiry into the UBS takeover of Credit Suisse. The probe aims to look into any potential breaches of criminal law by those involved in the merger. Now, the takeover in March was arranged by the government to head off a potential meltdown in the financial markets following the collapse of 2 US banks, but it's been very unpopular within the country. Joining me now is Fiona Cincotta from City Index. Fiona, what do you think they're looking for in terms of criminal wrongdoing?
The thing is, we need to keep in mind that this deal was thrashed out very, very quickly. So, and I think Switzerland is going to be very keen to protect its reputation and to be looking into these details to make sure that everything was as it should have been. In the fact that the deal was done so quickly. So, any wrongdoings by banking officials, by regulators, by the government officials, that's what they're going to be looking for. Just anything that suggests that this deal isn't perhaps as it should be. We mustn't forget, though, at the end of the day, this deal was done extremely quickly, and it was done at a time where there were a lot of concerns whether the bank would actually survive another few days or not. But that doesn't mean that things shouldn't be done properly. So I think that's what they just want to make sure.
Now, this has been incredibly unpopular, and it's very sensitive within Switzerland as well. They pride themselves, don't they, on banking and on their international reputation. Do you think that's going to sort of play into it, the public aspect of this?
I think that's got something to do with it. I mean, we know that the public's very upset with and angered by what's happened, and also the shareholders as well. I mean, we know that there's an annual shareholder event for Credit Suisse tomorrow as well, which is going to be very much in focus. And we expect to see sort of, a lot of discontent voiced in that meeting, given the absolute, complete collapse of the banks in the days leading up to this deal being achieved. But I think overall, yes, that public opinion is going to be playing a part here.
And we've got a new banker at the top of this, Sergio Motti. He's back. What difference will that make?
That's right. That's positivity, I think, to the whole move. I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty, and that these two banks are trying very hard to sort of, merge two enormous banks. So it's going to be a massive restructuring play that they're going to have going on. So that's going to be very much in focus to make sure that the two banks can really find efficiency as they move forward. So that's what investors are going to be watching very closely for.
And we will, of course, be looking for what efficiency means in terms of job cuts. Thanks very much, Fiona Cincotta there. Now, Tesla has delivered a record number of vehicles in the first quarter of the year after slashing prices. The discounts were aimed at boosting sales at a time where consumers are facing soaring inflation, higher interest rates, but also unprecedented choice in the electric vehicle market. Our Asia business reporter Katie Silver told me how Tesla is cutting their prices, but Elon Musk is still missing out on that long-held ambition of 50% annual growth.
Well, he's close, but he's not quite there yet. So, for example, in that particular quarter, we saw only a 36% jump. So not quite that 50% jump that you mentioned, 36% jump on year. And as you say, it's a record number of deliveries, but it did miss many analysts' forecasts. And this has created something of a brouhaha on Twitter this morning with Elon Musk saying, actually, we made our forecast, but many analysts had predicted that the company would make about 430,000 vehicles in the first 3 months of this year. That is about 7,000 more than they did make, which was 423,000. In January, for instance, we heard from Elon Musk saying that he wanted to make about 2 million cars this year alone. Now, shares in Tesla have been on a roller coaster in recent years. They soared during the pandemic. Last year, they lost a huge amount of that value, but they have recovered some of that this year on account of that cutting of costs that you mentioned. The question now is this going to erode margins further? And will we need to see it make further cuts in costs?
Katie Silver there. Now, in other news over in Asia, factory activity has weakened in March due to a drop in demand from around the world. New data out today shows that the export-reliant countries such as Japan and South Korea both saw manufacturing activity contract, while growth in China started to stall, highlighting the challenge facing Asia as authorities try to keep inflation in check as well as dealing with weakening global economic momentum. And 50 years ago today, the world's first mobile phone call was made from a street corner in New York. The American engineer Marty Cooper, who's now 94 years of age, used his phone to inform a rival at a different company that his invention was a success. The phone was the size of a large house brick and used a battery which took 10 hours to charge, but you could only talk using the phone for about half an hour at a time. And it's also 50 years today since the now ubiquitous barcode was invented. Today, the rectangular patch of thin and wider vertical lines appeared on every kind of product in shops across the world with the distinctive beep. 6 billion times a day apparently now as consumers scan their purchases. The device was invented by a man called Norman Joseph Woodland, who traced a prototype barcode in the sand on a beach in Florida. That's an excellent bit of trivia for you. Let's have a look at the market, see what's going on. We've got a pretty mixed picture over in Asia. You can see Brent crude here. This is really the story of the day. $84 a barrel at the moment. So that's up 5%. European futures are going to be pretty mixed at the moment, and those shares will open in about 10 minutes' time. So all eyes on this here after that surprise move by Saudi. That's it from me. Plenty more from Lewis.